proposition. Well, to get more reaction from the opposition on this, we're now joined by the Shadow Minister, Malcolm Turnbull. Thanks for your time. You've already made it clear that you don't like one key aspect of this public interest advocate that the Minister has proposed. Why?
Well, this is just additional government regulation of the media. This is Stephen Conroy, who's been moaning and groaning for years, several years now, about the cruel and unjust treatment he says he's getting at the hands of the press. Has now got his heart's desire, apparently. His cabinet, the Gillard cabinet, has given him the green light to impose government regulation of the media. And really, this is just an attempt to, restrict freedom of the press. From our side of politics, there's a big philosophical difference here. Well, we believe in more freedom, they believe in less.
He says there has been change in the media landscape since the 2 out of 3 rule was put in place by the Howard government, restricting media companies to owning only 2 voices out of 3 in one market. There has been change since then, and he's
There has been change, and you know what's happened? The media has become vastly more diverse. There are more voices than we could ever imagine. There are so many news services, opinion, commentaries. There's almost an infinite range of sources of information now. No one could ever be in a position to read them all.
Are people still getting their main bread and butter information from the same mainstream outlets? Whether it's delivered online or through the TV?
Well, less and less. I mean, it's becoming more and more diverse. He's talking about. I think he said the threshold for regulation of media outlets is with a circulation or
60,000. I think he said
60,000. Well, that would certainly pick up Kevin Rudd's Twitter account. It'd even pick up my Twitter account. Is he trying to censor?
So you couldn't merge with Kevin Rudd?
Is he trying to? Yes. Is he trying to censor Kevin Rudd's Twitter account? Or this is how stupid it is. The bottom line is we should welcome the diversity and the freedom that the internet age has given us. Stephen Conroy, who claims to be a great digital champion, is now trying to shackle it.
The other role this new public interest media advocate will have is essentially overseeing the press council or press councils, the industry bodies, making sure they stick to their rules they've laid down. Do you have a concern with that aspect of this new body as well, new advocate as well?
Well, why do we imagine that a government-appointed official is the right person, or indeed that any person is required, to oversee the way the media enforce or conduct or manage or enact their ethical rules? I mean, this government has a default. It's got a natural default to regulate, to constrain freedom. What we should be doing is looking at how we can allow more freedom, have less regulation. A lot of our anxiety about media regulation in years past was because of a sense of a lack of voices, a lack of diversity of voices. You now have more diversity than ever before. Increasingly, people are getting their news and their opinions online from a multiplicity of sources, including social media. And Twitter is just one example.
Let me ask you about a couple of other aspects here. He's referred to a parliamentary committee, a few things, including whether the 75% reach rule, restricting TV networks to only reaching 75% of the country, whether that should go. What are your views on that?
Well, I think the argument for about the 75% rule is a powerful one. It's obviously got to be looked at a committee, and there's a lot of different views.
But you're more sympathetic to that?
I'm much more sympathetic for that. And let me just make this point, David, because this is very important. There is a distinction between reach and local content. You could have a company, take a Southern Cross, for example, that has, for argument's sake, 25% of reach. I'm not sure whether it's quite that amount, but how much local content they're running is a matter for them. I mean, they've got some regulations, but just because
those rules, can't you?
Well, you can, and you see what some of the networks are saying, and certainly the smaller regional players are saying. They're saying things are getting so economically tough for us, so commercially constrained for us, that unless we can merge with a larger entity, we are not going to have the financial wherewithal to do the local content. Now, that's something that should be looked at. But you know something? It doesn't need to be looked at in a committee, in a couple of days. These are big questions. Why is he rushing it? Why does it have to be passed by the end of next week. What's the deadline?
I want to ask you that, but
is
he's
that
also
the changeover from Gillard when he gets the chop?
Well, he's also referred to a committee, the outsourcing of program content, like the Meet the Press program that's now being produced by News Limited. What are your thoughts on that sort of thing?
Well, again, I think this is this is his paranoia and hatred of News Limited. I mean, for example, Alan Kohler, who had his own business publication, which he sold to News Limited, does the business commentary on the ABC. Is the ABC controlled by News Limited? Fairfax and the ABC collaborate often very effectively particularly on Four Corners. Does that mean that Fairfax controls Four Corners, or does Four Corners control Fairfax? I mean, these are, again, this is this compulsive obsession that this government has to control and regulate. We should be welcoming the diversity that we've got, the accountability that the greater accountability we've got, rather than trying to constrain it.
So just finally, he has only given essentially 8 days, and he's just told us, the Minister, that the legislation won't be released now until Thursday of this week, and then there'll be 1 week for this to be passed.
Well, it's an insult to the Parliament.
And it's a take it or leave it proposition. Will anything get through?
Well, probably not. It is a characteristically incompetent, contemptuous approach to the Parliament. Just remember, this guy has got a lot of form. 2.5 years ago, he announced a deal on a new regime on anti-siphoning, which are the rules that determine how much premium sports has got to be on free-to-air as opposed to pay TV. Very, very important. 2.5 years later, he has not even been able to get a bill into the Parliament. We'll probably get to the election without any legislation being passed. I've never known anyone who was so good at starting things but incapable of finishing anything.
Malcolm Turnbull, we'll have to leave it there. Thanks for joining us.